Hello and welcome to another book club bedtime story. This week we're going to be reading You're a Bad Man, Mr. Gum by Andy Stanton, and it's illustrated by David Tazzyman. Chapter 1. The Garden of Mr. Gum. Mr. Gum was a fierce old man with a red beard and two bloodshot eyes that stared out at you like an octopus curled up in a bad cave. He was a complete horror who hated children, animals, fun, and corn on the cob. What he liked was snoozing all day in bed, being lonely and scowling at things. He slept and scowled and picked his nose and ate it. Most of the townsfolk of Lamonic Bibber avoided him, and the children were terrified of him. Their mothers would say, "Go to bed when I tell you, or Mr. Gum will come out and shout at your toys and leave slime on your books." That usually did the trick. Mr. Gum lived in a great big house in the middle of town. Actually, it wasn't that great, because he'd turned it into a disgusting pigsty. The rooms were filled with junk and pizza boxes. Empty milk bottles lay around like wounded soldiers in a war against milk, and there were old newspapers from years and years ago with headlines like "Vikings invade Britain" and "World's first newspaper invented today." Insects lived in the kitchen cupboards. Not just small insects, but great big ones with faces and names and jobs. Mr. Gum's bedroom was absolutely grimsters. The wardrobe contained so much mould and old cheese that there was hardly any room for his moth-eaten clothes, and the bed was never made. I don't mean that the duvet was never pulled back on the bed. I mean the bed had never even been made. Mr. Gum hadn't gone to the bother of assembling it. He just chucked all the bits of wood on the floor and dumped the mattress on top. There was broken glass in the windows, and the ancient carpet was the colour of unhappiness, and it smelt like a toilet. Anyway, I could be here all day going on about Mr. Gum's house, but I think you've got the idea. Mr. Gum was an absolute laser who couldn't be bothered with niceness and tidying and brushing his teeth, or anyone else's teeth for that matter. But, and as you can see, it's a big but, he was always extremely careful to keep his garden tidy. In fact, Mr. Gum kept his garden so tidy, it was the prettiest, greenest, floweriest, gardeniest garden in the whole of Lamonic Bibber. Here's how amazing it was. Think of a number between 1 and 10. Multiply that number by 5. Add on 350. Take away 11. Throw all those numbers away. Now think of an amazing garden. Whatever number you started with, you should now be thinking of an amazing garden, and that's how amazing Mr. Gum's garden was. In spring it was bursting with crocuses and daffodils. In summer there were roses and sunflowers, and those little blue ones, what are they called again? Those blue ones. They look a bit like dinosaurs. Anyway, there were tons of them. In autumn, the leaves of the big oak tree covered the lawn, turning it gold like a gigantic leafy robot. In winter, it was winter. No one in town could understand how Mr. Gum's garden could be so pretty, greeny, flowery and gardeny when his house was such a filthy tip. "Maybe he just likes gardening," said Jonathan Ripples, the fattest man in town. "Perhaps he's trying to win a garden contest," said a little girl called Peter. "I reckon he just quite likes gardening," said Martin Laundrette, who ran the laundrette. "Oh, that was my idea," said Jonathan Ripples. "No, it wasn't," said Martin Laundrette. "You can't prove it, fatso." In fact, they were all wrong. The real reason was this. Mr. Gum had to keep the garden tidy because otherwise an angry fairy would appear in his bathtub and start whacking him with a frying pan. Mr. Gum hated that fairy, but he couldn't work out how to get rid of it. So his only choice was to do the gardening, or it was pan wax. And so life went on in the peaceful town of Lamonic Bibber. Everyone got on with their business, and Mr. Gum snoozed the days away in his dirty house and did lots of gardening he didn't want to do. And nothing much ever happened, and the sun went down over the mountains. The end. Oh, sorry, I nearly forgot. Something did happen once. That's what this story's about. I do apologise. Right, what was it? Oh, of course! How could I be so stupid? It was that massive whopper of a dog. How on earth could I forget him? Right then. One day, a massive whopper of a dog. Actually, I think we'd better have a new chapter. Sorry about all this, everyone. Chapter 2. A massive whopper of a dog. That was the opening to the fantastic You're a Bad Man, Mr. Gum. It's an incredible book, extremely funny. I highly recommend it. If you want to read more, you can find it in my book club at the link below, or go to your nearest WHSmith and look for my red glasses. Get reading, and I will see you next week for another book club bedtime story. Good.